Hi, hello, welcome back to another book video. Um, I just want to come out and say I was dumb in that first one. What I thought was like the word treaty, right? Right? I think I called it a treate, but it's a treaty. I was wrong. Um, it is. See if I can remember it. A systematical exposition or argument in writing involving a methodical discussion involving no in a methodical discussion of the facts and principles involved and conclusions reached. I just fucking memorized that right before right before this. Um but like um so this is like um I don't know, like it's all wrapped into it, I guess, right? Like it's like it everything it talks about in here, it explains, like it's wrapped, it's self-contained, I guess. Um type of thing, possibly. Could be wrong on that, who knows. That's just kind of how I interpret it, and then from the examples presented from the website. So who knows, but nonetheless, so this is a whole encompassing body about ed what let's see, on Advaita Vedanta. Yeah. All right. So we finished the preface. The preface. Time for the introduction. Okay. Introduction. The Astavakra Samhita is an accredited classic of monistic Vedanta. It leaves no loophole for the misconception or misinterpretation of its fundamental standpoint or attitude. It would have been a matter of great satisfaction had we been in possession of similar works in other schools of philosophy and religion. The paucity, Paucity, of which is poignantly felt by scholars regarding the Buddhist schools. The present work makes us understand what monistic Vedanta stands for. Its assertions are categorical, positive, direct, and unambiguous. It is an ancient classic which provides that Gwadapa or Sankarakya did not propound a newfangled philosophy under the influence of Buddhist idealist thought, as a facile scholarship seeks to establish nowadays on the basis of superficial and flimsy parallelisms. This system of thought, on the contrary, had its moorings in the Upanishads and received definite articulation in older works, including the present one. The Upanishadic texts and the Bhagavad Gita have been twisted and turned by the commenters to suit their philosophical leanings and prepossessions, because the ipsissima verba of these texts are not unamiable to the exercise of eccentric ingenuity. But the present book stands in a class apart. Whether you agree or not, you are not left in suspense or doubt as to what it means. It gives a candid, unhesitating, unblushing, and unapologetic presentation of the cardinal principles of Vedanta, without consideration for and concession to our realistic predispositions. No wonder that it is a vade mecum for the monks of Sanakra's orders. Of course, it has not been widely popular with householders because it refuses to cater to their instincts or to make allowances for their existences of social or political circumstances. Edwards, Exigence. Crazy word. We must be grateful to Swami Nidam Swamparanda, the secretary of the Ramakrishna Mission Institute of Culture, for this critical edition of the text and for the vigorous English translation and the illuminating annotations. Being a sannyasin of the older Sanakrya, whose allegiance to the monistic Vedanta, as expounded by the founder, is unqualified and unconditional. The Swami has found this work naturally satisfying to his conviction and belief. It is an achievement to have made this austere classic popular with an appreciable circle of serious students of Indian thought. I have had the privilege of studying the text with the translation and comments of the Swami, and I have been struck by the simplicity of his English idiom, which makes the import of the original abundantly intelligible. The work forms an important addition to the series of Anglo-Sanskrit publications of the Ramakrishna order, and maintains intact their standard of perfection. It combines lucidity and simplicity with fidelity to the text and has the exactitude and precision required by academic scholarship. To be aware of the faith and trust that I have enjoyed at the hands of the Swamis has been an unfailing source of inspiration to me, and it has sustained my self-confidence. It was, however, with a good deal of effort that I submitted to the wish of Swami Nidyanswampuranda that I should write an introduction to his work. It was an honor and a task which left me no choice but acquiescence. Nobody is more conscious than myself of my limitations in this regard. Whatever may be the worth of our scholarship, I, for my part, am fully conscious that in Vedanta, at any rate the writer, in order to be successful, must possess a higher qualification than mere textual knowledge and intellectual conviction. He must have a share of the moral and spiritual endowment which is made the condition precedent by Indian tradition. A scholar can at most hope to be able to satisfy speculative reason, but it is the words of a monk that can produce conviction and the conversation of the whole man. It is not a coincidence that the majority of the best works on Vedanta philosophy are the products of monks. The success of the present publication and the response it has evoked are to my mind a fresh confirmation of the truth and justice of this tradition in the Vedantic literature. Water break. The present work is not a philosophical treatise in the technical sense of the term. It does not care to call in aid the intellectual resources which are the only stock in trade of all philosophical dissertations. We find it, on the contrary, an unfoldment of the ultimate truth, which is the final objective of philosophy, but which forever eludes its grasp. Philosophy, and even Vedanta qua philosophy, can only produce an intellectual conviction which falls far short of the direct realization of the truth. For direct realization, the spiritual aspirant must undergo a course of sadhana under the guidance and supervision of a guru who has himself gone through the grind and envisaged the truth face to face. Monistic Vedanta has uniformly discarded the world of sense and intellect and all that revolves round the conception of dualism as an unmitigated illusion for which there is no logical or ontological justification. All attempts at rationalization of the world appearance, together with the fundamental datum of logical thought, namely, the ego, are bound to end in a cul-de-sac and a confession of failure. The failure of logic is not due to the limitations of the human intellect, but to an intrinsic defect which vitiates the very nature of objectivity. This is the burden of the Upanishads and the entire Vedantic philosophical literature, from the earliest writings of the Gaudapad and Sanankara down to the last polemical works of Sriharsa, Situska, and Madhusana Sarasvati. Is those names are hard. Is occupied with the task of proving the unreality of the objective world by appeal to logic and authority alike. Vedanta philosophy admits a threefold criterion of truth, viz., authority, shruti, logic, yukti, and self-realization, atman bruhuti. Authority is equated with self-realization and is valid only because it embodies the results of the realization of seers of truth, which are attestation always open to attestation by the self-realization of the coming seekers of truth. The approach of Vedanta is thus seen to be rational in the sense that it is not in conflict with the demands of reason, but it also recognizes the limitations of reason and transcends reason by the help of a super-rational organon called self-realization, which directly intuits the truth. Reason is a helpful guide up to a certain limit, but it is after all a negative instrument, and its findings are bound to be negative in character. It helps us to discard and to negate what is untruth, but for the realization of the positive truth, it is incompetent and inadequate. Philosophy, which absolutely relies upon reason as the only dependable organ, has not been successful in its positive findings, for these have remained debatable points and have failed to command universal acceptance. The superiority of Vedanta lies in the fact that while it fully utilizes the resources of reason, it at the same time corrects and supplements the results attained by that means by a supra-intellectual organon, which does not contradict the findings of reason, but supplements them by its positive discoveries. The discoveries of this super-rational intuition satisfy the demands of reason in full. The tremendous hold of Vedanta upon the intellectuals of India is due to its secret of the reconciliation of reason with super-rational intuition. Undisciplined reason has its idiosyncrasies which lead to oh shit, which lead to clash and conflict, and so it stands in need of being checked by a corrective, and this is supplied by the superrational power of intuition in man. This recognition of the inadequacy of unaided reason must not be interpreted as advocating the anti-intellectual and anti-rational approach. Vedanta is thoroughly rational, and where reason comes to a standstill, it goes beyond by the light afforded by the super-rational organon. The falsity of everything that presents itself as another, as an other to consciousness is the conclusion which is deduced by the application of this triple criterion, and the philosophical literatures of Vedanta is occupied with this task. The fundamental proposition forms the starting point of inquiry in the Astavakra Samhita and is not the conclusion aimed not the conclusion aimed at. The aim is realization of the truth and not a rational defense of it. The self alone is real, and all not self is appearance. The false identification of the self with the not self is the cause of bondage. Bondage is thus due to ignorance of the real nature of the self, and freedom is attained as soon as the ignorance disappears on the dawn of self realization. The disappearance of ignorance automatically entails the disappearance of the not self, which is its product. The existence of an other is the cause of all our worry and unhappiness. When the self is realized as the only reality, difference and distinction vanish like mist before the sun, and freedom is attained. In point of fact, freedom is the very essence of the self, and loss of freedom is only a case of forgetting. The truth is illustrated by the example of the gold chain round the neck. A man wears a gold chain round his neck, but forgets its presence, feels miserable, and casts about for its recovery. Somebody reminds him of the presence of the chain on his own person, and he discovers it and feels happy. Such is the case with us all. We feel miserable because we do not realize the freedom that is ours, and through ignorance feel that we are in bondage. To the question of Yanka as to how freedom can be achieved, the answer given by Astavakra is simple. Know the self as pure consciousness, the unaffected witness of the phenomenal world, and you will be free. In reality, the self is always free. Freedom is not attained, but simply realized and discovered. The impediment to self-realization and freedom is our preoccupation with the objective world, which inevitably leads to conflict of interest and consequently to feud, jealousy, revenge, and moral depravity. The result is the erection of fictitious barriers between man and man. To get rid of these barriers of separation and the obsessions fostered by the possessive instinct, it is necessary to cultivate an attitude of detachment and to culture the moral virtues of charity, forgiveness, sincerity, and love of truth. This moral discipline liberates the mind from the octopus of sense objects and diverts it inwards. The inward diversion of the mind will enable the aspirant to realize his independence and detachment from the network of relations which constitute the phenomenal world. So long as the mind sees another self, there is bondage. Freedom consists in seeing nothing but the self as in everything. The self is the Brahman, the undivided and undifferentiated consciousness, existence, bliss, and is not to be confounded with the ego. The ego is consciousness limited and distorted by the mind, as light is distorted by a prism. As soon as a person effects his liberation from the snares of the ego, he becomes supreme bliss to which there is no limit. The teachings of the Astavakra Samhita is simple, direct in its appeal, and unhesitating in its delivery. It goes straight to the heart, and the very contemplation of it gives even a matter-fed mind a foretaste of of the bliss of freedom. Freedom and bondage are purely the creations of ideation. He who considers himself free is free indeed, and he who considers himself bound remains bound. Here, a simple formula is prescribed as the means of escape. Think yourself to be free, the eternal unlimited consciousness bliss, and you will be free and happy. The joy of self realization is depicted in the soul stirring language. The description is graphic and stimulates contemplation. The disciple realizes that it is his own self that sustains and illumines the universe. The whole universe belongs to him, or rather hangs as a floating appendage to his being. The unity of the self with all that exists is realized. In fact, nothing exists but the self, and the lingering trail of objectivity vanishes on the disappearance of ignorance. The multiplicity of selves, too, is an equally unmitigated appearance. There is neither a plurality of objects nor a plurality of subjects. There is only one subject, or rather, no subject. The self-existent, infinite consciousness plays the role of a number of subjects through its false identification with the mind organs, which are the creations of the resourceful Maya. Maya is the prius of the phenomenal world, the principle of unreason, the fountainhead of irrationality, the enchantress of infinite resources. There is no escape from her hypnotic influence save through knowledge. But there is a silver lining to every cloud. Maya is not the Satan of Semitic conception. She is not absolute evil and is possessed of a redeeming feature in her character, for she is also the embodiment of science and reason. This provides an outlet. Science kills nay-science, reason kills unreason, and both being embedded in the self-same principle called variously Maya, Prakriti, or self or not self, this principle carries in its own self the secret of her death. This truth has been graphically described by Vyasa in his Bhasa on the Yoga Sutra. The mind is like a river with two opposite courses, one moving towards good and the other towards evil. The good one moves in the channel of discrimination and leads to liberation. The evil one moves in the channel of non-discrimination and leads to bondage. By dispassion of the evil course is a by dispassion the evil course is arrested, and the practice of discrimination sets free the good course. This gives the raison d'etre of moral discipline, which is emphasized with so much vigor in the Sasatras. Another water break. That's why I did this one inside. Fuck. Jewel break. Um, I hope y'all are enjoying this so far. I'm enjoying this. I could read this book so many times. Never gets old. You learn something new every time. All right. The necessity of detachment, which was alluded to in the very commencement of the work, is emphasized in the third chapter. Craving for the objects of the senses, it is declared, lasts only so long as there is ignorance of the beauty of the self. But the bubble of the world order is pricked as soon as the surpassing beauty of the self is realized. In the fourth chapter, the self is spoken of as the unrivaled Lord of the universe who is absolutely free from fear. This fearlessness has been emphasized repeatedly in the Upanishads and was the perpetual burden of the teachings of Swami Vivekananda. Of all systems of philosophy, it is preeminently Vedanta that can make us free from fear, be it of death or of tyranny. Vedanta is the only philosophy that will satisfy the aspirations of mankind for all time. Chapter 5 speaks of the fourfold way to self realization, and Chapter 6 emphasizes the unreality of the outer world, both sentient and insentient. Chapter 7 is the reaffirmation of the truth through the self realization of the disciple. Chapter 8 makes an advance upon the position attained. The realization of the unreality of the objective world is only a preparation for the similar realization in respect of the inner psychological world. The psychological world is as much an illusionary appearance as the objective world. The mind and the ego are primarily responsible for the bondage, since they obstruct the vision of the infinitude of the self. In the next two chapters, the intellectual and ethical worlds also are declared to be unreal accretions, and the temptation of virtue is shown to be an obstacle to higher realization. The values of life, economic, moral, and aesthetic, are not ultimate verities, and they hold the field so long as consciousness is in the grip of desires. Chapter 11 deals with the cultivation of moods which enable the aspirant to withstand the onslaughts of fortune, the good and the evil alike. The next three chapters affirm the futility of the intellectual, aesthetic, and moral disciplines which become a hindrance to the aspirant for liberation as he advances in the course of his sadhana. Even the striving for liberation ceases before the goal is reached. Chapter 15 is unsurpassable for the sublimity of its language and teachings alike. The disciple is exhorted to realize that it is verily through your ignorance that the universe exists. In reality, you alone are. There is no Hiva or Isvara other than you. This takes us to the acme of perfection and to the highest point of realization. One may feel tempted to read in these utterances the anticipation of the doctrine known as Ekajivanda, the doctrine that only one individual subject exists, but it would be more correct to consider the deliverances of this kind as proceeding from the transcendental point of view. The absolute identity of the self and the negation of a second principle, spiritual or material, are the cardinal principles acknowledged by monistic Vedanta in all its schools. The recognition of values and the ethical and intellectual disciplines are valid only provisionally, that is to say, in the lower plane of reality, where the influence of avidya is in force. But when the avidya is destroyed, together with its satellites, there is no experience of a second entity even on the phenomenal plane. In other words, the phenomenal world disappears with the cessation of its cause. The latter doctrines of Ekajivada, one subjectivity, and Ajatavada, no creation, also seek to emphasize the unreality of the phenomenal world and the reality of the self alone. There is absolutely no difference of opinion among the teachers of monistic Vedanta with regard to the supreme truth. The denial of extra-subjective existence to the phenomenal world is only a case of emphasis, and even when provisional validity and extra-subjective reality of the phenomenal world is admitted by the author of the Vivinara and his followers, there is no room for the mistake that these grades of reality have only a relative validity and they do not hoist a second reality parallel to or alongside of the self. The admission of grades in reality, lower and higher, is a methodical device and is a concession to lower intellects. It is always recognized that the apparent prav- Pratibachatskia and the conventional Vyavanhakya, that one's hard, orders of reality are rather phases of unreality as absolute reality is denied to them. All things other than the self are only an appearance, no matter how persistent and consistent some of them may appear to be. The admission of provisional reality is not in conflict with the essential doctrine of Vedanta only that only one self exists, as the reality accorded to the phenomenal world is only vicarious, it being recognized that it shines in borrowed light, and, apart from the substratum of the self over which it appears, it has no existence whatsoever. Chapter 18 is like the last chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, a resume, R-E with a little thing, S-U-M-E with a little thing, of the previous teachings. It is the final summing up of the findings in the it is the final summing it is the final summing up of the findings. In it, the nature of the liberated soul who is still in life, Jivanmukta, is described. To such a blessed person, the world of plurality and the gradations of values have lost all their pretensions. The phenomenal world stands exposed and the Maya is checkmated. The glowing poetry and the rapturous language of this chapter can come forth only from a person who has lived through these experiences. They do not fail to invoke a response, even from persons who are in the shackles of the world. They appeal with a force and a charm that are irresistible for the time being. The last two chapters give through the realization of the disciple himself a reaffirmation of the truths inculcated in the previous chapter. The Astavakra Samhita bears close affinities to the Bhagavad Gita and seems to be the product of the same age. We find it in the same forceful, simple, unlabored diction and the same ring of sincerity and truth. No recourse is had to the weapons of logic which were forced in latter times to counteract the attacks of rival philosophers. There is absolutely no trace of wavering allegiance, no intellectual or linguistic elaboration, and no weakness in its deliverances. Without entering into chronological controversy, which has very seldom proved profitable in the field of Indiology, it may be put forward as an undisputable proposition that the work is older than Gaudapad's Caraccas, which promulgate the doctrine called Ajivata, the doctrine of no creation, which obliterates the line of cleavage between the Parhatsvaikya and the Vivyantra planes of reality. One may find in the present work the germs of these extremist theories. In our judgment, the parallelisms, which are by no means pronounced, are capable of a satisfactory explanation if approach is made from the transcendental point of view. January 1st, 1940. Sadakari Mukjiri. That was a long one. That was a long chapter. It wasn't even a chapter, it was just a fucking introduction. Hope y'all enjoyed that. Yeah, like he really lays it out what we're about to get into. Because yeah, this book, yeah, it doesn't care about your feelings of what you thought was what the world was. Like it's very simple in its explanation. Like it's simple, not easy. Um, Back to that thing. And I guess we'll go back and go over some of my highlights. Um, but hope you come up with your own conclusion. If you would like to discuss it, make a comment, fucking shoot me a DM on Twitter, raw gray matter. Instagram's being a attain. But nonetheless, first highlight is it leaves no loophole for the misconception or misinterpretation of its fundamental standpoint or attitude. And yeah, for real, like it lays down the line, and it's a line I think everybody can get behind. Like it is like a if you zoom out far enough on everything, it makes sense, right? Like it's saying we're all one. And then if you zoom in far enough on everything, quantum physics, we're all one. So, bada bing, bada boom. Next one. Whether you agree or not, you are not left in suspense or doubt as to what it means. Like I just said. Next one. The work forms an important addition to the series of Anglo-Sanskrit publications of the Ramakrishna order, and it maintains intact their standard of perfection. So, like this book is credworthy, is more or less what I was highlighting that for. Like, just because you haven't heard about this text doesn't mean it's not valid. Um, like I think everybody should read this. I don't know why we haven't heard about it. Um, so I think this just proves it got the clout. Next one, we find we find in it, on the contrary, an unfoldment of the ultimate truth, which is the final objective of philosophy, but which forever eludes its grasp. 'Cause, yeah, you can't conceptualize the ultimate truth. It's bigger than any of us could ever imagine. It's way cooler, you know. So perfection is unattainable, but the pursuit of perfection is very real. Um, that type of thing. Like this is philosophy is always reaching to find the ultimate goal, but you can't, right? It's just built to fail, not fail though, because you learn from your failure type thing, right? Um, on to the next. The discoveries of the super rational intuition satisfy the demands of reason in full. Um, yeah, it may not make sense with your left brain, but your right brain's gonna click. That's what it's saying, I think. Next one. The aim is realization of the truth and not a rational defense of it. Exactly. Like it's and like it says in here, we'll get to it. Like a true, like a real truth seeker, right? Like when you're on your path, all you need is just a little bit of information to get you started on your path. And like there's no defense. It's just giving the truth. Like it's not worried about if you don't understand it. It's just putting the information there for when you're ready to come back to it, I think. Next one. In reality, the self is always free. Freedom is not attained, but simply realized and discovered, which is very true. Like, you control your reality. What we're living in, you control your version of it. And once you grab that shit by the nuts, anything's possible. Everything's possible. There is no limit. Sky is not the fucking limit. Um, but you just have to learn that information, right? Like you decide that you want to be free, and then you start acting upon your own free will in every sense of the word. Um, but in that, right, you realize that everybody else is you, so you work for the collective good as the whole. Okay, next. Freedom consists in seeing nothing but the self and restart. Freedom consists in seeing nothing but the self as and in everything. What I was leading up to, right? Like seeing like realizing like everything is one and seeing yourself and everything else. Like seeing like the same thing that's in you is in me and is in your mom, your dad, the guy across the world. It doesn't matter. The tree, the dog, the this pillow, it's all the same shit deep down. Like it's all just constructed, and you are in control. Okay. Next, as soon as a person effects his liberation from the snares of the ego, he becomes supreme bliss to which there is no limit. Right there, right there. Like, because time isn't real, right? Like, there's just progression, and when it's your time in your story to progress, right? For this, like, light switch comes on. Like, as soon as you turn the light switch on in the room, where's all the darkness go? And you know what I'm saying? Like that type of thing. Next one. Um, Maya is the Prius of the phenomenal world, the principle of unreason, the fountainhead of irrationality, the enchantress of the infinite resources. There is no escape from her hypnotic influence save through knowledge. But there is a silver lining to every cloud. Maya is not the Satan of Semitic conception. She is not absolute evil, and is possessed of a redeeming feature in her character, for she is also the embodiment of science and reason. This provides an outlet. Science kills nescience, reason kills unreason, and both being embedded in the self same principle called variously Maya, Prarati, or not self. This principle carries in its own self the secret of her death. Um, yeah, like there is no evil, there is no good, there is no bad, right? There is just things. Um, and when you label something as good or bad, you're just not looking at it with a big enough picture. Um, type of thing. And as shitty as that sounds, I mean, some things are like objectively worse than others, right? Or like some shit's really bad, you know? But you got to be able to look at it from a non dualistic perspective, and come away from it with a lesson, I think. But what do I fucking know? Next. Of all systems of philosophy, it is preeminently Vedanta that can make us free from fear, be it of death or of tyranny. Because once you realize that all of this is self and this is all one grand story, and you just give in, you don't give in, but you not even like a surrender, but you tap in. You tap into oneness consciousness, and instead of playing a passive role in the story, you get to play an active role in the story. And it just so happens, like statistically throughout time, bad people become the actors and have like kept everybody to be passive, and most good people don't become active, or the ones that do get shut down. um See that time and time again, you know but once you're on that wave, like you ride that bitch to the end. Like once when like once the light's on, that shit's on. Like you can choose, I guess, right? Like they seen in the Matrix, right, where the guy gets the choice to take, the red or the blue pill to go back into the shit, and he chooses to go back. Like you can, I guess you can have the choice. You can flake out. You can not see it through. But why not? You've already made it this far. See it through. See it through, my boy. And when I mean my boy, I mean, girls too. Like it doesn't fucking matter. Unisex, because I spell it BOI. My boy. Moving on. Um, It is verily through your ignorance that the universe exists. In reality, you alone are. There is no Hiva or Isvana other than you, because our consciousness is shared. Like the same consciousness deep down that's in me is in you, it's in us all, and we all just tap into it in varying degrees. Like beat, you know what I'm saying? Um, and if we all realized that the universe was like this, so much shit would be better. And the world as we know it, right, would come to an end and we would transition to like new, better shit for real and not this like fake bull new shit that they keep trying to fucking put on us, like going to another fucking planet to escape instead of like actually fixing our shit and realizing, our flaws, like just perpetuating it on another planet. Dumb. Have you not seen fucking Wally? Come on. Unless we fix our shit, ain't nothing gonna get done. But next, the admission of grades in reality lower and higher is a methodolog method meth fuck methodological like methodological device and is a concession to lower intellects. It is always recognized that the apparent parati huskia and the conventional viviantaka orders of reality are rather phases of unreality as absolute reality is denied to them. Um, like what real reality is bigger than what we can see and bigger than what we can think. And that's okay. That's how that shit's supposed to be. That's how that shit's built. Don't have to you can go on your quest to try to find your own answer and like come up with a reason that satisfies you, but like as long as you get the big picture, right? Like chilling, chilling. That's how I took that, I guess. And that was it for for the introduction. Chapter 1 is instruction on self-realization. I'm excited to get into that one next time. This is a long one, but it was good. Um, I liked reading it out loud. I like doing it inside. Um, I hope you guys liked it. Please let me know what you think. Um, but yeah, I hope you have a great time until I see you next.